This is Monocle on Design, a show where we discuss everything from architecture and craft to furniture and graphic design. I'm Nick Manise. On today's program, we round up the trade fair Maison&Objet with interviews from across Paris. We hear from the designers of emerging studio Amca Oval, look at the intersection between furniture and architecture, and talk rugs and landscapes with one of France's top creatives. All that coming up on Monocle on Design. Hello and welcome to today's program. I'm joined in the studio by Monocle's Associate Editor, Grace Charlton. Hi, Grace Charlton.
Hi, Nick Manise.
How are you?
I'm good. How are you?
I'm great. We're back into the swing of things. I feel like you were literally in the office for a day and then you were jetting off somewhere else. How's your opening weeks of the year been?
It's been so good. I just have not been in the office, like you said. I've been on the road. I went to Florence for Pitti and then straight to Paris for Maison&Objet with you. So yeah, off to a flying start.
And a great start as well. I go to Maison&Objet every year. It's a twice yearly trade fair that takes place in Paris. There are events across the city in galleries and showrooms. And the way we typically divide it up is you seem to tend to go to the showrooms, galleries and parties and have a good time in the city centre, whilst I schlep it out to the trade fair halls to, I guess, look at the industry at scale, because you kind of have, obviously, all these different brands and makers in little booths across the trade fair. But this was your first time at the trade fair. What did you make of it?
I thought it was good. It was a good scale, good variety. I mean, really huge variety. We even, from the chairs and the vases and all of the straightforward pieces of design, we also had a game of foosball on this plexiglass, foosball table. So there's something for everyone.
I was kind of hoping to make it sound a little bit more like hard work. But yes, foosball obviously taking place. The beauty of it is that maybe if you're just going to furniture showrooms in the city, you might not discover the world's best garden hose, which I think is potentially what we came across. That might be in Monocle's pages in the coming months. But also it's this beautiful coming together of all these unexpected brands. I mean, were there any particular things that jumped out at you other than the foosball table? I don't know, maybe all the antiquities that have been collected or something like that?
Yeah. There's a section of the fair called Unique et Éclectique, and I just thought it was so fun. It was full of vintage pieces from all around the world. It's a little bit more eclectic. They found the word for it.
They really kind of have nailed it. They've not tried to disguise it behind anything else. Briefly, I always like to kind of touch on trends or themes. This is your first time, I guess, being thrown into this particular trade hall context. I mean, did anything jump out at you? Any patterns that you've noticed that emerged?
I think the French are still big on pastel colours, like a sky blue and a sort of soft purple. There's something very Parisian about that to me. What was the biggest trend for you?
They don't mind having a little bit of complexity in their design. You know what I mean? Like there's always maybe a colour or a range of colours rather, or a pattern or perhaps decorative detailing that you might not expect or find elsewhere. I feel like maybe at the moment when I'm thinking of contemporary Italian design, there is still a lot of kind of sleek lines, very singular surfaces, whereas in Paris or certainly in France, it felt like there's a lot more going on.
We're far from Copenhagen when you're in Paris, design-wise.
And I think that's kind of good, and I think that's maybe the beauty of this fair as well. You kind of do get a temperature check on a particular place and its design scene. We're going to leave the trade fair hall now. We're going to talk about some of those fun kind of gallery moments that we have going across the city. Tell us a little bit about Amca Oval. There are a couple of designers that you met.
Yes, so I went to this amazing space in Paris called Halo. It's a restaurant concept pop-up shop area. And I met with Alexis Martial and Adrien Caillodeau, who are two really lovely designers. They founded their brand Amca Oval 3 years ago, and they come from a fashion background, which is a trend we've discussed many times on this show. I won't bore the listeners any more about it, but there is a creep from the fashion industry into the design industry, and they were launching this collection called Aurora, which I am obsessed with. It's sleek aluminium pieces for the home, like light sconces and vases and candle holders, and it's all made from aluminium and it slots together. It's all very modular.
I will say, counter to my point earlier, this really is a departure in style from that kind of decorative French style that I was talking about earlier. There are a lot of very clean shapes here, but with singular material with aluminium. Let's hear from the duo now.
There is a big industry of metal in France, and we are producing everything close to Lyon, in the Drôme area of France.
Our modular system has been thought as a way of thinking as a child's playground. Especially when we imagine these modular systems, the goal for us is like all elements are made from the same pattern in laser cut in aluminium, and it's also part of our way of thinking of designing, always inspired by the past, like as a childhood feeling, adolescent feeling, when you had like a present for Christmas and you like open a box and you just build your game. And this is also what we want to bring back with this project. Like all our objects arrive in a flat box, flat pack, and you build by yourself. So I like this way of thinking when you buy a piece and you can build it and place it where you are. I like it. Aluminium arrived very naturally for us because it's all made in a material that can be recycled. And this fact is also part of our way of thinking, especially due to the fact that we were like 15 years in the fashion industry, which is like very consuming and wasting a lot of raw materials. When we started the project, we were thinking about how we can build some object with sustainability, especially because what we wanted is like meet a supplier that has knowledge into his own material, that knows how to work and how to recycle it. And then from this, let's say, mandatory starting point, we were thinking object. When we start thinking about the Aurora modular system, the goal was how we can manage to have like solid elements that can match our textile design, which was our first product for Amca Oval.
How do you think Parisian design is special? Because I think actually this is Paris's time. I think the stuff that's coming out of Paris is like amazing at the moment. The interior design, the product design, the architects. Are you like proud to be Parisian?
Yeah. It's very important to be part of this new generation of interior designer and architect or like just designers. Because I believe like everybody can design whatever he wants if he has an idea. And I think in Paris right now you have a new energy in like building new spaces as restaurants, stores, like many spaces wants to be unique. And I think like a lot of people also wants to live in a special space, their own space. Yeah, thanks to be in Paris because a lot of spaces were like getting old. And now, like, everybody wants to have his own new space. I think a good moment, and it's also a reason why, like, all those new designers are here. We have the opportunity to create this new generation of design based on the past, obviously, but, yeah, taking new energy from the city.
But it's true that something is happening every day in Paris right now. There is this energy that Adrien is speaking. Something new since the last 2 years, I guess. People change their habits of working also, of living. It's something that during the last 10 years we didn't felt.
What's really special about France and in general is all the guilds and the craft and the atelier that you've somehow preserved. So maybe to go back to the manufacturing in France, how do you tap into the local savoir-faire?
But the savoir-faire for us is very important. All our items are made in France. It makes us also thinking that we should do, and this is what we do actually, all the packaging are made in Paris, all the way of stamping everything, engrave everything is made in Paris. I think like you have all the atelier, all the savoir-faire, as you said, that is in France, that disappeared a bit, but like also the new generation is also more into working wood, metal, glass, ceramics, and all those small ateliers are popping up everywhere in Paris. And it makes also designer finding suppliers and then creating new things.
That was Alexis Martial and Adrien Caillodeau from Amca Oval.
I mean, I want to maybe just briefly touch on that fashion and design link because we did kind of gloss over at the start. We've talked about it a million times, but these two are kind of keeping a foot in both worlds. Do you think that's beneficial?
Definitely. I think it just keeps you creatively stimulated, and for them it makes sense to do both at the same time. In the pop-up space shop, they also had little baby tees with similar patterns and jumpers, and so it's all cohesive. It all makes sense. It's not at all like jarring to see the design pieces against the clothes on the rack. Also, they were telling me that being sort of adjacent to the restaurant was amazing because after a few drinks in the evening, a lot of the customers would wander through to the shop and make a few purchases.
I guess it's a beautiful way of seeing how restaurants can support bricks and mortar retail.
Exactly. It's a marketing technique as well, for anyone wondering.
Very, very, very savvy. I want to talk a little bit about, I guess, their use of aluminium as well. I mean, we were at various different things across the city and spoke very shortly afterwards. You loved the way that they talked about this as a material and I guess the energy of the material. Any reflections on that?
Yeah, they spoke about aluminium and how it carries energy, which immediately my senses picked up. I was so interested because every time I see a brushed aluminium piece, I immediately gravitate towards it. So maybe that's just because it's very trendy at the moment and I can't resist I like the coldness of it as well. And I like the way you can maybe play with it in a space by adding textiles or a rug or a wood. I like the juxtaposition and the sort of harshness that something like aluminium can bring.
Yeah, absolutely. And I guess when you talked about maybe this is something that's a little bit trendy right now, it feels like the contemporary material of the moment, even though it's a material that's been around since the beginning of time. I think this very much bears the mark of its age. And yet when I look at it, one, I don't think that's a bad thing. I think that's ultimately a good thing. A lot of the time when we talk about timelessness, you want something that is very distinct and speaking of the era, and it's very proud of what it is and what it represents.
And it's made in France, made in, Lyon. It's a long-standing industry for the country. So,
I feel like,
too soon to tell.
Far too soon to tell, but I feel like it's ticking all the right boxes. We'll be back to tick some more boxes after this.
How long do you think it would take you to travel the world to hear from the most perceptive and relevant speakers on the global news agenda? To mix that up with a trip to visit the business people benchmarking best practice in media, retail and hospitality. And to make time too, to delve into a rich mix of great design stories and rich cultural discoveries. Well, you can do all of this in just 60 minutes each week by tuning in to The Curator, a whistle-stop tour of the best of the last 7 days on Monocle Radio. Subscribe and download the show now or listen every weekend on Monocle Radio.
We're back. Your turn, Nick. Where in the city are we heading next?
So we're going to Liège's apartment gallery in the 8th arrondissement. They are an amazing French furniture firm. Firstly, I will say also, you've got to love a gallery showroom. This isn't about product. This was about experience. This interview took place during a cocktail party. We found a kind of quiet room to sneak away to have this chat. I was surrounded by artworks. There was, of course, your standard, your essential ballet dancers moving around a sculpture in the middle of a room on the top floor. It was absolutely gorgeous. A reminder that furniture isn't something that you just necessarily buy, but something that you want to ultimately experience. And I think that was what made this so beautiful and so fun. But
I'm just picturing you dancing around your furniture at home, recreating the experience.
Truly, I think that's kind of where we're going with. Kind of giving it a little bit of Saltburn energy, but maybe minus the mass killing and with a little bit more clothing on. I think that is certainly something that I want to bring to my own home, just pleasure and enjoying a space. But we're gonna dive into what this interview is actually about. Liège Studio, which is, I guess, the design branch of the furniture company, paired with Perrault Architecture to create a new bookshelf called Block. And that's what they were launching at Maison&Objet in this wonderful gallery showroom. It's a reimagining of the furniture created for Paris's National Library, which Perrault Architecture completed in 1989. So it's basically taking something that was built bespoke and built custom for this library and recontextualizing it for the home. It's modular, it's got very clean, simple lines, available in a couple of different natural timber colorways, and then, I guess, brought back down to the scale of the home. Because I think that's what I found so fascinating about this. It's this process of taking something architectural and bringing it into a domestic residential sense, but produced at an industrial scale. So to unpack this link between the two, we spoke to Liège's CEO Christophe Cailloux and Gaëlle Lauriette-Prevost, an interior designer at Perrault Architecture.
The French National Library, we were very lucky to be able to design all the furniture, all the detail, all what's beyond to the library. And regarding that, we want, for the story with Liège, we want to take out the bookshelf from the library to the domestic field. We work together to adapt all the different detail, all the different proportions, to be able to have this very monumental bookshelf become less monumental and more domestic for the interior of the houses.
Architects so often design bespoke furniture for a project, and it's made just for that project. So then how do you start to translate it back to something appropriate for the home? Maybe, Christophe, it's for you. How did you become involved in this? What drew you to work on this project?
I think at the beginning of every fruitful and interesting project, there needs to be a nice encounter. We had a super interesting first meeting. We didn't discuss about the library at the beginning, and I felt at the end of the meeting we need to do something together. And there was some kind of a coincidence. This year is the 30th anniversary of the inauguration of the French National Library, and this year is the 14th anniversary of Liège. And they started to speak about this library and the bookshelves they had created for the library and say, maybe that would be interesting to introduce it in the collection, to adapt it to a domestic environment. Say, wow, that's brilliant. This bookshelf should become something adaptable. We started to have, a very easy discussion. Shall we keep the same proportions or not? Shall we keep the same wood? And we started to have a little bit more formal meetings with the creative person, because I'm myself not a creative person. So I was just listening because I was interested. And it was like a ping-pong game. Gaël and Dominique would suggest something. Okay, maybe that should be a little bit, the depth should be a little bit higher, and maybe we should have some partitions. The goal of this integration was to keep the idea of the National Library, to make it for a domestic environment, to make it easy to use, easy to adapt, to customize, and to make it not only a bookshelves, but to make it a piece that can be a freestanding piece that can be used actually in architecture for the partition of a room. So if you look at each side of this book, it's nice on every side. It's nice on the back side because it can be the back if you partition it for a room. And it became, of course, you see the inspiration, but it became something completely consistent to a domestic environment.
Gaël, there's this translation of the design. I mean, tell us a little bit about that process. How did it change? How did you make it appropriate from one setting to the other?
This bookshelf, in fact, is a small piece of architecture. It's a continuation of the architecture, and that is the strength of these pieces. You look at it, okay, you have nothing to say. It's so evident, the proportion, the wood, the quality of the finishing, the way of the block makes a partition, the way of the detail to protect the books. Everything is, in fact, totally evident.
Is that what makes it a piece of architecture?
Yes, exactly. I think on my sense, it is. And that means that it's a permanent pieces. It's a pieces in 10 years, you will like it. And that is very, very important. It was the spirit in which we designed the furniture of the library, because in the library, you imagine you're not going to change the furniture every 2 years, so you need to have a certain quality, a certain thickness, but it's not a heavy thickness, it's a thickness who makes that it's very high quality, and we find exactly the same spirit in the Maison Liègre, I don't think in Christian Liègre, and this is very, very important. Step by step, we design an object which is fitting in a house. When you see the library here, it's an Haussmannian house, and it fits perfectly. There is no problem.
Yeah, it's this contemporary work that's clean, structural, clear lines. Christophe, do you think of a lot of your work as architecture pieces rather than furniture?
I think this one in particular, and this is something that I would like to emphasize what Gaël said, you really feel that it's a piece of furniture which is architectural. There is something in French law which is a little bit peculiar. We call it a building by destination. You have building, then you have furniture, and sometimes when the furniture is so much integrated in the building, it becomes a building by accession, and actually you cannot, if you sell your building, you cannot take the piece of furniture. It's part of the building. With this library, you feel, yes, this is architecture. You think, you understand it has been designed by people who had the architectural background.
How do you hope people feel when they encounter this?
I think that they will feel very confident with the piece, because in fact it is a very quiet piece, simple. You have a human relationship at the end with the furniture that you have in your house and in your home. And I think these pieces, you have to be very confident. I think it's the goal with this kind of pieces, because it's not a small piece, it's a big piece.
I mean, I only seen it in the context of a beautiful, wonderful party that's happening here. And it seemed very confident. It didn't seem like it was standing on its own. It seemed quite proud of itself, which is beautiful. Christophe, I've got to ask you.
Yes, I think I would like, besides the practical, very practical use and the possibility to customize, I think that it will enhance the room, whether it's a very classical room, which it's neoclassical building from the 18th century, or if you have a very modern penthouse. This piece will enhance the look of the space and will create the space. And I hope this is how people will feel about it.
That was Christophe Caillou and Gaël Laureat-Prevost there. They were talking about Block, this beautiful partnership between Perrault Architecture and the AG. I mean, Grace, this is obviously translated from a bespoke architectural commission brought into the home. If you had, I guess, carte blanche access to take something beautifully and architecturally designed and to bring it into your own home, what would you pick? Is there a piece of furniture from a particular project?
I would love to somehow incorporate a bit of a conversation pit into my home in the style of the TWA terminal in New York by Eero Saarinen. It would be ambitious, and we'd have to get rid of the little, the armrests in between, so it wouldn't be as waiting room-y in my own home. But how nice would that be?
I mean, this is phenomenal. That is not where I expected this to go. You've almost brought also a little bit of architecture in as well, which I kind of like, because there's a structural element to this. It's not something that can be readily translated from home to home.
No.
You're building it bespoke. You're building it custom.
And I think my poor lovely neighbour from downstairs, Chris, would have to, lose some inches on his own ceiling to accommodate this.
Or maybe we just take Chris's lovely downstairs apartment and turn it into a little bit of a gallery showroom, maybe a little bit of ballet dancing around the conversation pit.
Hey, I reckon he'd be up for it.
I think that sounds all right.
What about you, Nick? What would you like to incorporate into your own home?
I think, because I want something that I also feel a personal connection with. When I was 19, I tried to go find myself in India, as I think a lot of people do. I spent some time in Chandigarh, which is the Le Corbusier designed city in northern India, which has all these amazing government buildings that he also worked with Pierre Generet on to design custom furniture for. So maybe taking this French theme from this episode, I'm going to pick something from there. I'm going to go the kangaroo chair, designed in the mid-1950s. And I think what I like about it is it's kind of laid back. It's something that you could really feel yourself settling into. But I also kind of like that you're not going to necessarily fall asleep in it. Like, it's a timber frame. I like something to kind of make sure I stay awake. Sometimes I start to drift off when I read. So I feel like having a little bit of tension, a little bit of like firmness in a chair can also be a good thing.
Beautiful.
So finally on today's show, Grace, we're going to throw back to you. Tell us a little bit about what we're going to hear next.
So I met with Sandra Benamou in the showroom of Edition 169, which is a rug brand. She's collaborated with them to create Tellus Mater, which is a collection of rugs inspired by her trips to Israel and the sort of landscape she could see from the plane from above. She's an interior architect and designer, and she loves to explore territory, but also cinema, art, music through her work. And it was just really nice to pick her brains for a little bit.
And I swung past as well, and they're almost more works of art than necessarily rugs. I don't know if I'd necessarily... These are so beautiful and, I guess, dramatic that I don't know if I'd necessarily want it on my floor. I don't know if I'd want to be walking across it.
I would rather hang it up on my wall and have it as a sort of modern tapestry. It's so poetic what she's done. And it really, it pulls from different materials and different cuts and different techniques. It really is a masterpiece.
And I think that's what makes this so wonderful. It really is, if we're going to be furnishing our home with something, why not have it something that we'd also want to hang in a gallery-like space? This is a kind of theme that's emerging this episode. But let's hear your chat with Sandra now.
Tellus Mater means Mother Earth. I did walks for hours, and I felt I was walking in the moon, and I wanted to express what I felt, like all these layers and the fertile and arid, something very strong and at the same time subtle, very soft, so powerful. I used to work a lot with the Edition 169 previously. We worked together for residential projects, and then now I say, okay, I wanted to create a whole collection with them because their specificity is to use so many different techniques and so many textures. I wanted to express this with the rugs. We designed 2 drawings, one like a landscape view and one vertical one. From this, we started working with the studio and saying, okay, like a patchwork, how we can mix all the textures, all the different techniques, how they can match together. And I wanted to be very rich in the sense that to use all the variety of the materials and the techniques, and at the same time something subtle and not too bling or whatever, And even in the colors, I wanted something strong but soft at the same time. So there's 3 different range of colors. There's one like kind of whitish, and one very dark, like a night view, which is very strong, which is amazing, one of my favorite. And one plain view, more in the greens and the blue and all the natural colors. It was really, really exciting to work with the studio, to learn the different techniques, how you can mix also the wool and the jute and the hemp and the silk and how they can match together. When you see the final result, it's very subtle and strong at the same time.
It's so like textural and organic.
Exactly.
And there's something sort of like almost ancient about them, like seeing the landscape. I love them. I think that's so beautiful. So
you really feel the desert and the earth when you see them. Even the vertical version, we can feel like we drew like a crack in the rocks. Actually, the pictures were made in the Beau-de-Provence in a carrière of stone. Amazing, which matches totally with the rugs, and so
I think it's so fun as well with a rug to maybe bring the natural world inside. It's very grounding when I see it.
Exactly, and actually there's also one rug that we developed in a more rough version, only like wool and linen and hemp and alpaca, which is gorgeous also. But more, there's no silk or like shiny materials, texture.
And amazing to work with a manufacturing company that has all of that expertise.
The idea was to promote, in a sense, all these savoir-faire, that they have. And this was really, really exciting. I learned a lot.
Sometimes with design, you can get really stuck in one product, one manufacturing, but really design is about your life and how you live and bringing that in.
I mean, we are so lucky to be able to explore so many different textures, techniques, materials, artisans, especially in France also. We are so lucky to have those old-fashioned, handmade craftsmanship. We always want to explore more. What I love in my work is to reinvent myself each time and push myself, and go somewhere where I'm not comfortable with and learn also.
That was Sandra Benamou there. Nick, you're an ex-landscape architect. What landscape would you choose?
Still a landscape architect in my heart, though, and I think that's important. If I could pick a landscape, I mean, it's got to be coastal Western Australia. That's this amazing feeling. Obviously, we live in London, but when you return home, that as you cross into Western Australia, you've kind of got, the blues and the whites of the waves breaking on the shore. Then you kind of have these gradients of sand colours where some of it's wet, some of it's dry, so it's darker to light, moving into the scrub. And then, maybe I'd have a little bit of grey on the very edges as you start to kind of fringe into the city. That's the landscape I would do. And I'd definitely hang it up on my wall, and it'll make me think of home and my mum every single time. Throwing it back to you, what would you pick?
The eastern coast of Australia. I was thinking about this as well because I was flying over and we sort of flew down from Cairns, and the way you can see the different islands, and they almost look like spores and like bacteria on the water at some point. Like they're so electric blue, the vibrancy is insane.
I like this, a little bit more abstract. I think that's brilliant, and maybe that's exactly what Sandra's done in her work. It's really this magnificent translation of the landscape to a rug, to something that you're ultimately going to want to have in your home. Would love to talk more about it, but that's all we have time for on today's show. Grace Charlton, thank you very much for joining me.
Thank you, Nick.
For more design stories, listen to our 5-minute midweek bonus show, Monocle on Design Extra, which airs on Thursdays. And if you enjoy print, then do pick up a copy of Monocle magazine as well. It's on all good newsstands now. Today's episode was produced and edited by Maylee Evans. I'm Nick Manise, and you can reach me on nm@monocle.com. Thanks for listening.